Um, we'll start. I would like to know who is here. So some like very brief introductions. We're going to talk briefly about language justice. The bulk of our meeting will be about plain language and communication. And then we'll talk about working with interpreters and hopefully have some time at the end to debrief and discuss. So my name is Kristen Selby. I'm the program manager for New Roots on the Catholic Charities side. I've been with New Roots for about almost 4 years now. Previously, I was an ESL teacher, and I am TESOL certified and taught at different schools and programs to adult English language learners in Kansas City. So we started doing these language access trainings a few years ago with some people from the USDA in an effort to work with, kind of assist USDA workers in teaching classes to New Roots participants who are English language learners. And then kind of from that, these trainings we found that they were helpful for anybody who's working with speakers of other languages. And so we've done several different iterations of this. And I am so excited that people were interested in participating in this leading up to Farmers and Friends. And, hopefully we can make this event more inclusive for speakers of other languages. So just maybe for the sake of time, we'll maybe skip the cultivate people if that's okay. But everybody else who's here, I would love to know like where you're from, what your role is, and then maybe briefly about your experience working with speakers of other languages, either professionally or personally.
Maybe I can just call people's names. So Linda Hetzel, do you want to go first?
Unmute. Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Linda Hetzel. My farm is Prairie Birthday, and I'm owner operator. And I come from a nursing background, so I had access to people who spoke other languages, but I would say my experience is pretty limited, and I am not bilingual, sadly. So I do have a CAP student, a high school senior here who's fluent in Vietnamese, but I can't speak it with her. So that's my experience.
Great. Ben, since you're not with Cultivate, I guess you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm I'm Ben Carpenter. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator for New Roots for Refugees. I'm on the Catholic Charities side. So I'm not a farmer, but I've been, for the last few months, teaching the English for Farming classes with some of the New Roots farmers, and then coordinating other sort of educational opportunities in the farm. So that's me.
Cool. Nick Garcia, you're next.
Yes, I'm Nicholas Garcia. I'm with Treehouse Urban Farm and Native Nursery. I am a campesino and owner, I suppose. And my experience with second language actually comes from my family. My grandmother and a few of my tias were all immigrants. And so there were two languages spoken in, depending on, if it's a Sunday and you're at your tia's or your abuela's house, then there's two languages being thrown about, and each party hearing in their own, hearing the language of the other and communicating in English. So it was a very interesting mix on weekends of two languages. And that's kind of the extent of my language acquisition, is I can hear it and I can understand it, but I speak back in English or broken Spanish.
Cool. Thank you, Nick, for being here. Andrea, you're next. Andrea Clark.
Hi, I'm Andrea Clark from Casey Healthy Kids, And I think in pre-New Roots for Refugees days, I volunteered with a family that was being resettled, and kind of participated in some of their English language lessons. But other than working with interpreters at like large events, haven't done more of one-on-one interpretation before.
Cool. Thanks for coming. Emily, I'm skipping you. Sorry, you work at Cultivate. Hamza, you're next.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm off camera. I'm still kind of working and on the move. So, but really happy to be here. Thanks for hosting this. My name is Hamza. I'm the policy fellow with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, or NSAC. And I am fortunate enough to be bilingual myself. I grew up in a bilingual household and have done a number of service and other programs, both in the language that I spoke growing up, which is Tamil. It's a South Indian language, as well as in Spanish, and have also had the challenge of speaking more than like 3 to 4 languages in a weekend just to communicate with different people. So really excited to see how I can apply that personal experience to my professional one.
Awesome. We're glad you're here. Next is Ryan. I think that's also Sankara Farm. Okay, now Sankara's gone and it's just Ryan.
Yeah, that's me. I don't know if you can hear me.
Okay. Yes, we can.
Sorry, I missed the prompt. It's name and organization, Ryan Sankara Farm.
Yep.
And our experience working with different
Speakers
languages.
of different languages. Yeah.
I mean, at Maddie Road, I did art education and gardening at Maddie Roads, and Maddie Roads up in the Northeast KC is really diverse as far as languages. Yeah, I've broken Spanish, broken French, broken Portuguese, but there's a lot of mediums of communication, music, art, but that's kind of how I learned some phrases. A lot of listening to a lot of music from different places. But yeah, I know I talk way too fast for people who English isn't their first language. So I think that's something I want to learn some tips on. So.
Nice. Thanks for being here, Ryan. Daniel Robinson.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Robinson with Groundwork Northeast Revitalization Group in KCK, and I am the Northeast Grocer Project Coordinator. And I have very limited experience working with speakers of other languages. Took a little bit of Spanish, worked at Cultivate for a short period of time, and worked with some of those New Roots farmers.
Cool. Thanks for coming, Daniel. Then we have Hannah.
Hey y'all, Hannah Quigley. I am here with INSAC as well. I'm a policy specialist with the organization. I appreciate you all letting me be off camera so I can multitask and make dinner an hour ahead for y'all. So appreciate that. And my experience, it's varied a little bit over the years. I've done some program design for individuals where English is not their primary language. Some nutrition education, some engagement with farmers, and have led a few focus groups with simultaneous interpretation. So a little familiarity, but also tend to maybe speak too fast when public speaking. So I will try to slow that down on Saturday. I appreciate this resource a lot.
Thanks for being here, Hannah. And then last but not least, Tom and Rebecca, maybe.
Hello. Hi. Yeah, I'm Tom Ruggieri. I'm here with Rebecca Graff. We're out at Fair Share Farm. We've been farming for 20 years out here, done a lot of different things. Our organization and role, we're going to be in the expo, and we're going to talk about our electric tractor conversion and putting in over 7,000 linear feet of berms and swales on the farm. So kind of a how-to, kind of some of the soft trades a little bit. And so that'll be something to really kind of figure out how to be able to express that. And so we don't have a lot of experience working with speakers of other languages.
Cool, thank you. We're glad everyone's here, and I'll pass it back to Kristen.
Yeah, thank you. It helps me to sort of know where everybody's coming from. It sounds like a lot of folks have more like personal experience with, multilingual experiences. So that's a little bit different than some of the participants normally. So just for a little bit of context, this training is usually like a full 2 hours. And I wanted to, we shortened it a little bit so that people could put it into their schedule. And like Summer said, it's a rainy late afternoon. So I don't want to take up too much of anyone's time. Usually this is pretty like participatory. And so I'm still going to ask questions. So, don't be shy to unmute yourself and answer, or put answers in the chat. Samra will be looking at that and reading people's answers. Okay, I think many of you may be familiar with the New Roots for Refugees program, but I'll give a brief overview. So New Roots is a 4-year training program for refugees and former refugees in Kansas City with agricultural experience in their home country. During their 4 years in the program, we teach them about growing in the Midwest and adapting to a very different growing climate than what they're typically used to. We assist them with business planning, teaching marketing and selling skills, English classes, and then we provide language access, which is a really important component of our program. Anytime we have a workshop or a meeting or a field walk, we always provide interpretation for that, which, there's many resources in Kansas City for growers, but a lot of them, don't have the language access component. And so that's sort of the bridge that New Roots provides. New Roots participants have a really varying level of English language speaking ability, from very little, feeling not very comfortable conversing at all in English to being almost fluent. And so you'll see that range with participants who are coming to Farmers and Friends. So, you may hear one farmer, speaking up a lot and understanding English very easily. But don't assume that means that, everybody's at that same ability. And yeah, as I said, we use interpretation frequently, and we will be inviting interpreters to Farmers and Friends. And so you'll see, farmers and interpreters, and you'll hear that going on. So a lot of this work in language access is based on this concept of language justice. I really like this definition from the Highland Center. They have a great toolkit for language justice and access. So to them, language justice is about building and sustaining multilingual spaces in our organizations and social movements so that everyone's voice can be heard, both as an individual and as part of a diversity of communities and cultures. Valuing language justice means recognizing the social and political dimensions of language and language access, while working to dismantle language barriers, equal power dynamics, and build strong communities for social and racial justice. So the ultimate goal, to me, or one of the important goals of language justice is that sort of the equalizing power dynamics, so that, just because someone speaks English in a room, it doesn't mean that they have more power than someone else, which is often the case, because if, there's not a shared language, someone who doesn't speak English, doesn't have as much power, doesn't have as much of a voice. So yeah, we're really seeking to dismantle some of those barriers. And then of course, we know that making more room at the table, builds stronger communities for everyone, stronger communities for social and racial justice. So yeah, really quickly, I'm curious if anybody has heard of this concept, how they might define it, and what language justice could look like in action in your work.
I would just say that for me, it's so similar to diversity, just in growing diversity and in resilience. So the greater diversity we have in languages, like in plants, the more resilient we will be as a community. That's how I would see it. It's a great definition and very systems oriented. So it's real, I think it's a good one.
Oh, Kristen, we can't hear you.
Oh, uh-oh.
We can hear you now.
Oh, okay. I was just saying I like that comparison with crop diversity. Anyone else want to share their thoughts on this concept, or if they've seen language justice playing out, or what it could look like in your work or life?
Can I chime in? So I would say this concept is very, looking back to my own family history of my parents being victims of Americanization programs, and this is how the language died in 2 generations, from, again, immigrant grandparents to parents with very kind of varying degrees in Spanish acquisition. My mother better than my father, because she actually went back to Mexico for a few years, to me, where it was, again, something that you hear at a young age, and you kind of get it, but don't really communicate it in it. Even I remember getting help from my grandmother for my Spanish homework in middle school, and then getting it graded that it's wrong because I'm speaking colloquial peasant Spanish, as opposed to, which is the language of family tie, to no, you have to speak this European. So the idea of a family of language justice, and to be able to hold on to language acquisition and cultural acquisition, how it's so intrinsically tied. I think that's the right word. That concept is very key. This is amazing being able to see this happen right now and being a part of it. So.
Andrea put in the chat too that she's an urban planner by trade, and equitable engagement means there needs to be language inclusivity for people to participate in public decision making.
I didn't want to chime in because part of I think part of providing more resources, and empowering, each of us to provide resources, say for interpretation, that needs to be reflected in our empowerment, what do you call it? Budgetary justice, if you want to call it that, because, is there a Missouri Department of Agriculture grant for farms to get interpreters on the farm for our farm tours? Because, these are professional services, and it's either professional development or it's, budgets as an ethical document that reflects either justice or restoration, or, it's got to, increasing our capacity is kind of the thing,
All right, well, let's move on to some more practical tips for plain language and communication. So plain language ensures that the listener understands as quickly, easily, and completely as possible. Plain language strives to be easy to understand and use. It avoids verbose, convoluted language and jargon. I think I wrote that last sentence purposefully because that last sentence is verbose. It's sort of convoluted. So yeah, that's sort of an example of what not to do. Basically, a communication is in plain language if the language, structure, and design are so clear that the intended audience can easily find what they need, understand what they find, and use that information. And so for this context, going into Farmers and Friends, I know most of the communication will be verbal, but we will touch a little bit on design and like structure of a communication because that's an important piece of plain language. And then, yeah, whether you're, utilizing an interpreter or not, plain language is a valuable skill. Being able to communicate more clearly, more easily, it's valuable, I think, professionally and personally, and hopefully, these skills or these practices can come in handy in other ways as well. So we're going to talk about 8 different elements of plain communication. These are sort of just key ones that I've identified that I think are really important, and then we'll discuss examples of each one. So we're going to want to use concrete, familiar words, explain unfamiliar terms, omit excess words, use the simplest verb tense possible, use active voice, use short sentences and sections, structure your message, and then use nonverbal cues. So these are the 8 that we're going to focus on and talk about more in depth. All right, so using concrete and familiar words, this is really important. So I just have some examples here. The first one is reach out to. So this is something I hear people say a lot, but what do you guys think is like actually a more concrete way to communicate what this is saying? Instead of saying reach out to, what could you say?
Contact.
Yeah,
Phone.
contact. What was that, Linda?
Phone. I'll
Phone,
phone you.
yeah.
How will I contact you?
Right. Yeah, so contact, phone, call. So a little bit simpler without that. Yeah, more concrete. All right, what about hash it out? Like we have a problem, this issue, we're gonna need to hash it out. What could you say instead?
Negotiate.
That could be good. It may be a little bit less familiar, like maybe a higher level word for English language learners, but that is definitely more straightforward.
Well, that's a thought. My reaction to familiar words, my question was familiar to who? Because we all have our own cluster of familiar words based on everything.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It is somewhat subjective. Maybe instead of saying familiar, oh, what do I mean?
Fundamental.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, instead of hash it out, you could say talk about.
Good job, Andrea.
Oh, is that what Andrea said?
Yeah, she got it in the chat right before you revealed the answer. So I want to give her credit.
Great. All right, what about this word encroach? I saw this in like a farmer's market rule, like something about your table not encroaching on the pathway.
Andrea says block.
Great. Yeah, that was what I thought too. So yeah, the point here is sort of just pausing, maybe taking a little bit of time before communication and, thinking about the words that you're going to use and, how you can simplify them, making them more concrete and fundamental, as Linda said. This is an example of a slide from some K-State extension workshop. And I thought some of the language in here is not so concrete and familiar, but it could be changed to be more familiar. So we have vegetative growth, green leafy shoots, and vigorous stems. Is there a way, and I know with agricultural language, sometimes it feels hard to simplify it because there's a lot of, technical language, but any suggestions for making this a little simpler?
Well, vegetative growth could be leaves and stems.
Mm-hmm.
I think vigorous is kind of an intense word.
Fast growing.
Healthy.
Strong. Yeah, and then, for like the vegetative growth, or maybe for the green leafy shoots, maybe you could say something more like has many leaves and shoots. Leafy is sort of I think a less familiar word. So kind of, just simplifying it, making it a little more straightforward. All right, number 2 is to explain unfamiliar terms or, terms particularly related to agriculture that, a beginner might not be aware of, particularly in English. So I would encourage you to spell out acronyms the first time you use them. Explain differences in similar terms or like commonly confused terms if using, and then pre-teach vocabulary. So for example, if you're gonna, demonstrate a tool at Farmers and Friends and you're gonna use a certain word to refer to it, like point to, the word, like, and the tool, like define the word that you're gonna use. Any terms that you're going to say a lot that are sort of agriculture specific, kind of going over those at the beginning would be really helpful. This is an example of like a New Roots workshop where we were talking about planting potatoes. So at the very beginning of the workshop, we provided a vocabulary list for these agricultural terms that a beginner might not be familiar with. So we defined hilling and we defined mulch, and we provided a picture of someone hilling potatoes to kind of define those somewhat unfamiliar terms.
Would it be fair to say that when we used to have newspapers, they were written at the 5th grade level, that maybe that could be a basic approach?
Yeah, that's actually, we have like a collaborative project where we're kind of creating these educational materials. And I think the goal, Summer, is it the 5th grade level? That's what we're usually aiming for.
Yeah, I think it was 5th grade or below. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you are like, I know this is not, the context for Farmers and Friends, but there's actually a lot of resources online where you can put something that you've written into like a system that'll tell you what grade level it is. And then, from there you can edit it and do it again and see where you're at. So that's actually a really helpful tool if you have some time
What do we call those tools to search?
I don't remember, but I can look it up. We're going to share resources after this, and I'll be sure to kind of name. Do you remember, Samra? We'll find it and share.
I'm looking it up and I'll drop a link.
Okay. All right, so this is a really important one, to omit excess words. And it's something I'm definitely guilty of doing a lot, rambling, adding asides. So yeah, just kind of paring down your language, like the most necessary things. So instead of saying a sufficient number of, what could you say instead?
A lot or enough. Andrea.
Yeah, a lot. Good job. What about on a monthly basis?
Every month.
Exactly. Yeah, every month or monthly. So just, you know, monthly basis is really not necessary. So every month or monthly is, you know, the simpler way to say it. I think, again, I saw this in a farmer's market application. So a total and complete description of all products is very important. What excess words could you omit there?
Describe all products.
Yeah, describe all products. You don't even need is important. Because obviously if you're telling people to do it, you think it's important. So yeah, describe all products. And this, I think, goes hand in hand with, you know, I think a lot of people do talk very quickly. And so not just slowing down your pace, but slowing down and, you know, thinking about the words that you are going to choose and omitting the excess ones. All right, so number 4 is to use simple present verbs. So this is what you would think of as, I mean, it's called simple present, but just the simplest verb that you can use without a lot of extra, you know, tenses thrown in there. So instead of saying, we would like you to submit your application by February 15th, how can you use a more simple verb tense there? How can
apply by February 15th?
Yeah, apply by February 15th. Yeah, that's better than what I said. Even I said submit your application. So yeah, changing it from, you know, would like you to submit to just submit. And that's, you know, an active, simple present verb. Or apply. That's even, you're omitting a couple of those excess words. So that's great, Nick. All right, applicants who were not previous vendors at the time of application will be required to pay the additional fee. Failure to do so could have an effect on the degree to which the applicant can be considered.
Kristen may or may not have looked at a lot of market applications in her previous role. Maybe
Yeah,
first time vendors have to pay an additional fee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one, there's a lot going on there. So yeah, I said new applicants must pay an additional fee. And then the market.
Is it too ominous to say or else?
It would definitely be, you know, more to the point. So yeah, there, you know, you're just seeing So the verb there, were not previous vendors, they would be required. So, that it's a more like complex verb tense. So, carrying it down to new applicants must pay an additional fee. And then in the second sentence, could have an effect that, that again, that's more complicated. And so just paring it down to that simple present verb tense is better, more clear. And then along with thinking about the verbs that you use, using active voice rather than passive voice is generally clearer. So when the subject of a verb does something or acts, the verb is in the active voice. When the subject of a verb receives the action, is acted upon, the verb is in the passive voice. So like that really famous passive voice sentence is mistakes were made. That's passive, instead of saying I made a mistake. And so, yeah, using that active voice is a little bit clearer. So here's a couple more examples. Yeah, again, these are all from farmers market, sorry. How could you make the verb in this active?
Could you say limit information to relevant products or the business?
Yeah, so changing that is limited to just limit. Yeah, that would make it active. Great. All right, I think we have another one here. Price signs should be displayed before the start of the market. How can we make that active?
Display prices before the start of market.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of should be displayed, you're just saying display. So you have that, direct action that's happening. All right, so number 6 is to use short sentences and sections.
Kristen, Ben had a question/comment about active voice. He said, is it fair to say that active voice sentences often take the form of directives? I think yes, but you're the English teacher.
I think in the examples that I used, yes. And I think a lot of times when you're talking about farming or like you're teaching, you're going to be using directives. So, mow the grass or, use the tool in this way. They're not always like, I went to the store, that's active, but I'm not like directing anyone. So, but yeah, I think that's like a helpful way to think about it though, especially when teaching, direct someone to do something instead of having a more passive suggestion, I think is good. Okay, and then I just kind of found this block of text again in a market application. And you can see that first one is just like a long, chunk of words. And so I took that and I parsed it out into, having bullet points and having different sections. So, I think that is the one on the in the green is much clearer. And this is, a written example, but for, speaking at Farmers and Friends this weekend, using shorter sentences, that will be a really great thing to be aware of. And sort of, like chunking your ideas into like smaller smaller sentences or smaller thoughts could be like a helpful way to think about that. So this is where, you know, design also comes into play in plain language, just making sure that like a reader can easily find the information. You know, the second one, it's much easier to find the information that you need than the first. This is another example. So I have two different websites here. The one on the left, you know, there's just very long paragraphs that aren't broken up, and it's all sort of the same size font. But then the one on the right, it's just, you know, you have a bold title there, and then smaller paragraphs, you know, those, yeah, the bold headlines and then bullet points. So it's a bit easier to find the information that you're looking for, or even like what the person is talking about on the right than on the left. Here is another, I think, K-State one. So, you know, that all of that text there is just pretty overwhelming. I think that that could have been, you know, all of the bullet points under there could have been taken out, and you could have just had physical, chemical, and biological. They were obviously going to go into more detail about, you know, each of those things in later slides. So, you know, removing that information here and just saving it for when you get to it later would have been clearer. And then this is another example from, you know, one of our workshops. So short sentences, you know, keeping it as simple as possible. All right, and then number 7 is to structure your message. So I kind of think of this as providing a map for what you're going to say. And when you provide that, it makes it easier for the listener, you know, to follow you. So a little bit less relevant for what we're talking about now, but, you know, maybe even as you're thinking about what you're going to present for this conference, or if, you know, you're giving a tour at your farm, having an objective for you know, the communication, you know, what are the most important things you're going to talk about, and communicate those at the beginning. You know, again, providing that map for your listeners.
I want to say, though, that it's going to be hard to do that with the design of this Farmers and Friends. So we have people moving through, and they won't be necessarily there to get the intro. So unless it's written on a newsprint or something, or a handout, well, then it's still a language barrier. That's going to be hard in this design, I think.
Yeah.
Right. We're hoping that people will kind of move in flocks, if you will, you know, so that you'll have one and then you are kind of, you know, repeating a similar thing. But I agree that, you know, structuring it super well is more difficult in an expo setting.
Yeah, that's totally fair. So then, like, announcing, you know, when you're moving on to a new topic or a new, you know, part of your communication, you know, now I'm going to talk about this, sort of providing that transition, and then, you know, repeat and review important points. So at the end of the meeting, or, you know, at the end of your presentation. So some of the important things we talked about today were X, Y, and Z. Does anyone have any comments or questions about this? And, you know, Linda, maybe that's where this could apply a bit more to Farmers and Friends, like as you're coming to, I guess I'm picturing it, you're sort of cycling through these presentations. So at the end, summing up what you talked about, which gives people an idea of, what already happened maybe before they got there and whether or not, they want to stay and hear more. And so, yeah, it does sort of providing that at the beginning and at the end would be helpful. All right, and then the last one is to use nonverbal cues. So using gestures, pictures that are relevant and real. I would always encourage like a real picture as opposed to clip art if possible, particularly with farming. Using concrete objects, which it sounds like people definitely will be doing that this weekend. And I think for this context, that is going to be really important. The relevant objects, the real things, gesturing, like pointing to things, being really specific about what you're talking about will be really helpful in communicating across the language barrier. So the entire point of plain language, you want to ask yourself, can the intended audience easily find what they need, understand what they find, and use that information? So as you're thinking through a communication, you can use this as like a checkpoint. It's the information, can they easily find it? Can they understand it? Can they use it? And sort of use that as like a guidepost. Okay, I think we have time to do this. So kind of combining all these things. Ben was going to help me co-lead this, and he's feeling a little under the weather, but he created some sentences for us to kind of work through, and I really like what he came up with. So using these 8 principles that we've just gone over, I want you to, try to figure out how you can make a communication a little bit more clear. And then again, you can like put it in the chat or just unmute yourself. All right, so we're going to rephrase these. All right, let's wrap. Sorry, I got to move this. Let's wrap things up here. I've got to be down the road for dinner by 1:15. Real quick, I want to cover some of the resources offered by the USDA for new farmers. All right, how can we make this more plain language friendly?
Linda had to leave and I almost thought her response was rephrasing it, which it almost kind of worked. Sorry, have to take care of animals. Just adding a few things.
So maybe we're almost finished. I need to be home. I mean, by 1:15, should you actually say like the time of like, 6:45 instead of using little things like that? All right.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about these USDA resources for new farmers first, before I leave.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, saying I want to talk about rather than I want to cover, that the language of cover is sort of, it's not clear. So changing that, giving a specific time instead of 1:15. You used home instead of be down the road, because again, that's sort of more flowery language there. And then wrap things up, saying finish instead, I think would be a better. word. All right, the next one. Tell you what, there's nothing sweeter than fresh raspberries. Customers can't get enough of them.
Oh, there's lots in the chat. Fresh raspberries are so sweet. Customers love them. The sweet raspberries sell very well. My customers love raspberries.
Yeah, great, A+. All right, and then the last one, from community gardens to indoor vertical farms, urban agriculture provides critical access to healthy food for local communities, as well as jobs, increased green spaces, and closer community ties.
Yeah, this is the hard one. You're gonna make us work for this one.
This is like something I wonder if Ben just pulled it from a grant or something.
Andrea Clark says she probably wrote that.
Yeah, I think it's from I think it's a brochure from USDA or something, or K-State Extension.
Growing food in the city feeds people and provides jobs for people in the city. Maybe I wouldn't put in the city twice, but that's what Nick Garcia said, which I think is good, much more direct and shorter.
Yeah, that's great. I think a few words that I would pick out, like provides critical access. I think that could be simplified. Gives people access, or yeah, how could you say that more simply?
Andrea wrote, urban agriculture helps people get healthy food and brings the community together.
That's great too, yeah. Yeah, so instead of provide critical access, because that's also sort of, well, not passive, but yeah, get healthy food is a great way to say it. All right. So yeah, I just like that exercise because none of these are, like ridiculous things to say. It's a very common way that people talk, but just slowing down when you're communicating across a language barrier and yeah, simplifying and making that language more plain is going to be really useful. All right, so the next part of our talk is going to be about working with interpreters, and I'll show you like an example of one of my teammates working with an interpreter. But are there any questions that people have before we move on to that?
Tom said he listed a few words that he is planning on using, and I am typing that they're not simple words, but he said contour, elevation, level, and a cultivator. I was going to suggest that. I'm echoing. I'm going to not suggest anything.
It's not, Tom's asking for simplification. Okay. So yes, Summer suggested visuals. Yeah, for like a contour. Yeah, like if you can, bring like even just print out like pictures with like the word sort of big on them, that could be helpful. Yeah. Andrea, I think curve and even are good. But yeah, there's definitely going to be some agricultural terms that, like it's just going to be necessary to use. And so providing like visuals and the word that you're going to use, I think that would probably be the most helpful thing, rather than trying to like think of new words if it's like an agricultural term. Great. Any other questions? All right, let's move on to chatting about interpreters. All right, so the first thing is to speak directly to the person and not to the interpreter. So don't say, don't address yourself to the interpreter and say, tell her or tell them. Just, communicate directly to the person, and the interpreter will interpret for you. Speak at a moderate pace, not too fast or too slow. So honestly, I think I'm a little bit nervous, so I've been talking a little bit fast. So, slowing down a little bit. I think my pace has been fast, so now I'm trying to slow down a little bit, but I don't want to talk so slow that it's like strange and incomprehensible, like a robot or something. So just try to speak at a moderate pace. Speak in short, manageable phrases. And then pause between sentences for time. Again, like Linda was saying, not all of this is going to be possible in this setting. A lot of the interpreters we work with, it's actually never like simultaneous interpretation, like what you might see like at the UN or something. We always pause and then give the interpreter time to interpret and then move on. So that's like the ideal scenario. Obviously, you might be short on time. And so if that's not possible, it's okay. But, if you can aim for that when possible, that's great. And then avoid asides or rambling if possible, just sticking to your message. Something I've found really helpful when I'm teaching a workshop with interpreters is like basically writing out a script or, writing the key points that you're trying to cover that can sort of keep you on track and help you avoid those asides. And then, of course, use plain language. All right, so now we're actually going to watch an example. Back in, I think this was like 2021, when we couldn't have like in-person classes, we recorded all of our workshops on like Zoom and then sent these videos to the farmers. And used interpretation. And so you're going to be able to actually see an example of Amanda teaching a class with Veronica interpreting. And we'll just watch about a minute of that. Hopefully it works.
I know, it's like we didn't rehearse this part, so I can't guarantee that it's going to happen.
Yeah. I have it pulled up on my computer, but my screen is like kind of frozen on this slide. So let's see. While we're waiting for this, does anybody have any like questions about working with interpreters? Have you like experienced that before?
I think as you were reading those principles, Kristen, I was thinking about some of the things that I do that you're not supposed to do. I think a big one is like avoiding like rambling or adding asides. And I think that one is really challenging. And, I've worked with interpreters for like 4 years very often. And I still like, I'll start saying something and I'm like, never mind, don't interpret that. And I think that's totally okay, just to like catch yourself and be like, nope, I'm not going to say that, because it can almost get more confusing if you're just like adding a lot, of additional information, and then the interpreter like doesn't really know exactly what to interpret.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's definitely something I've
Oh, go ahead, Ben.
something I've noticed about myself as well. And then also how many like metaphors and just like idioms that I use, like turns of phrase that don't translate across language barriers. And speaking concretely it's been like an interesting puzzle. It's been an interesting sort of skill to hone for sure.
Andrea commented on which I think we all are guilty of adding some filler words while we're speaking. So yeah, and as Kristen mentioned, like having a guide or like a template or a script for what you're going to say can be really helpful to avoid those because you have kind of notes on what you're supposed to say next. But of course, that's not possible at all times. And if anybody has, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna sort of to your point, just even telling a story, while like a lot of times that is helpful for some audiences, when you're working with interpreters, telling a story can actually sort of be like distracting and maybe even be confusing based on like the context. So, maybe trying to avoid that, I think I would suggest.
Mm.
Okay, I think I have the video pulled up. We'll see, hopefully you'll be able to hear it. Okay, do you guys see that?
Yes.
Can you hear it?
It's really quiet. Oh, there goes Veronica. We hear her.
We will learn.
It just stopped working, Kristen. It was working and now it's not.
Is it, you can't hear it or?
Right, the sound stopped working. I think when you didn't have it in full screen, it worked. I don't know. Just...
Yeah, I think we have to run the video and the audio at the same time.
That's good, Kristen. Never mind.
Okay, we'll forget about it, but basically, basically Amanda would say a sentence and then pause for interpretation. That's a good idea. Andrea will send that link with the resources later so you guys can watch that. And yeah, as you watch that, hopefully later, just Amanda's like pace of speech is very moderate. Her word choice is very plain and simple. She uses pictures and then like even using hand gestures. Okay, I'm gonna just actually drop the final like discussion questions into the chat here instead of sharing my screen again. Okay, so I know this was sort of a shortened training, but if folks want to reflect on what did you learn, what skills can you put into practice, and what do you want to learn more about?
Well, I just think that it was great to hear language justice in conjunction with like food justice, because it isn't something that's been on my radar, and just being kind of mindful of the language that we use every day, because we have a ton of Hispanic, Latinx people that we serve in KCK that we're trying to connect with as well. So I think just being mindful is a helpful tool.
Great, thanks, Daniel.
I think I mean, I've seen the presentation beforehand, but I actually liked what I think Ryan mentioned. I've never met Ryan, but about budgetary justice and like how this needs to be more intentionally, you know, made legitimate in budgets and things like that.
Sure. I do know that like the city of Kansas City, they're working on like a language access plan. And so I think like us encouraging, you know, whether you live in Kansas City, Missouri or Kansas City, Kansas, you know, advocating for language access plans. And so, you know, things are like built into the budget. I think that's really important. And I'm excited to see what happens with that plan. And I want to learn more about how we can like push those types of things forward and get them, you know, into our budgets.
I think part of that, like, not just like, oh, make sure you write in money in your grant, you know, to do this. I think the bigger thing for me is like valuing the skill of being able to interpret into a language. Like that is extremely difficult. And I don't know that, I don't feel like our society values like these really amazing language skills. So yeah, I think just, you know, yeah, increasing the way that people and society value language skills and language access.
I would also say that by allowing people to be understood and to understand, you're like creating a world where equity is actually possible, because without someone being able to be their true self and not having to amalgamate into the greater being, there's something that's lost. And with the erasure of language and the erasure of culture, like eventually enough things are lost that cannot be rediscovered. And it's powerful. It's a powerful tool. So dig it.
Yeah, agreed. To Daniel's comment that, oh, go ahead. Oh, sorry. That, you know, it's on his mind now. I think that is like, it's just so important, just that it's on your mind. You know, obviously this isn't gonna play out perfectly, but you know, progress over perfection, and anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. And so just having it on your mind and having that as the goal and working towards that is so important. And for you all to show up today and have this conversation, I think shows that, you know, we are making progress towards language justice. And yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Cool. Thank you, Kristen, for leading, and thank you everyone for attending. Yeah, Emily said she wished she had this training earlier. Mindfulness could have really empowered them to feel more valued and attempt to communicate. Yeah, so yeah, this is really valuable. I hope that we can keep these conversations going and, you know, spread them throughout the community. And I'm excited to see how Saturday goes. So yeah, I will see most of you on Saturday. And Kristen, thank you again so much for putting this together and facilitating.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And we'll make like a Google folder with resources. The last slide of my presentation has links to different, like the most helpful resources that I found, including like Soul Fire Farm has a language justice guide and some sort of more simple like language guides. So look out for that. And yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you.